China endlessly conducts its active negotiation activities, constantly insisting on discussing issues related to both Ukraine and the war in the Gaza Strip, and not only. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesman George Tykhiy, constant work is underway to organize a meeting between Zelensky and Xi Jinping. How long can this work continue, and how likely is it that China will also benefit from this meeting in the near future, as much as it is for us?
Yes, this is a really important question. How long can this last? This is a very important issue in the context of relations with China. When you ask whether the Chinese understand what is written in the peace plan of the summit, the answer is no, they do not. No, they don't, seriously. Not because they are stupider than us. No, they think differently in principle. We are Europeans. We have proved it. We know how to think like Europeans and Americans, that is, representatives of Western civilization. We have concepts like schedules, time plans, and the like. We have a linear time, so that you understand. If we are given a timescale, we will draw the same timestamps. The Chinese don't have it at all. Not at all. Therefore, time passes differently for them. And therefore, all that we are in a hurry there, and by some end of the year, they do not have such reasoning. For them, strange as it may seem, the farther to the east, the more abstract time becomes. And life. I didn't work much with the Chinese. I didn't cross paths much. But when I was heading in that direction, to Central Asia, which is halfway to China, I noticed that there were many new concepts of time, including even changes in the Russian language. For example, there is such an interesting tense as the past unexpected, from the Corvus time. It begins with a word that in Russian denotes the future. For example, I will go. I walked is the past, completed action. I am walking is the present. And, it turns out that I walked is the past unexpected tense. When a person says, it turns out that we signed the paper, this implies that the event happened a long time ago, but it became known only now. It turns out that in that peace plan, as a result of the summit in Switzerland, it is impossible to consider peace proposals in which there is no territorial value. This is core vision. It turns out that you can't look at it. So, I think that in China everything is even cooler in this sense. Since they are not interested in time at all, and this is true, there is space, a time continuum. We are always interested in when one person is skewed in one direction, another in the direction of space, and the third in the direction of time. We are always confused with this time, as if it were terrible. And the Chinese are not very interested in it, so they are there in general, never by January or December. In general, what about Russia, they will ask. And you will tell them, well, Russia is now weakening. Oh, it's getting weaker. That's good. They won't ask you a question like, so it will weaken by January. But in Washington they will tell you by which January it will weaken. Correct? By what January it will weaken. Therefore, all these Chinese negotiations, you see that one of them once again said, well, China, we have a peace plan. What do you mean? You wrote it a year and a half ago. You have already forgotten what it looks like. Here's the thing. For a year and a half it didn't work. And now everyone is like that. Yes. By the way, the Chinese have written a wonderful peace plan. Therefore, they do not call it a plan. China's position on the Ukrainian issue.
Ukrainian crisis, not war.
Crisis.
But in May, they drew up another document, a joint Sino-Brazilian plan, which already proposes 6 steps, shortened from the previous version.
And what is there? Don't you remember?
I didn't understand anything either. Well, there is the UN statute.
That is, the same meaning, right?
There is respect for the UN statute, but there is no specification on the withdrawal of Russian troops.
I mean, you see, the UN Charter is one thing, but... Well, apparently, there was China's position with 12 points. It was decided to combine it with the position of Brazil, which also included 12 points. In the end, there are 6 left, because 12 plus 12 equals 6. It's clear why. You need to take only the matching ones, and discard the rest. Well, 6 points coincided, and I think that's why the Sino-Brazilian plan appeared. Now they will connect Argentina. 2 points will coincide there, 2 points will remain. Well, that's okay.
Well, in principle, let them write. What do we care, right? We can read it and pay attention to it too.
Well, yes. What is the reality? Now I will bring the audience back to reality. In fact, there is no plan for Putin to make peace. There is no plan for peace. He does not want any peace. He wants to destroy Ukraine. All. Destroy. or we will destroy him along with his economy, with his country, which will go to hell, or he will destroy us. We do not have a partner with whom we can negotiate, agree on something. It simply does not exist. It exists only in the head. In the head of the Pope, Elon Musk, and nowhere else does the partner have this. Not because we want to or don't want to. It does not depend on us. There is a factor that does not depend on us. There are these goals that Russia is pursuing now. We cannot change these goals. We cannot influence them. We can try to destroy Russia. We will destroy it. Its goals will change.
Does Putin even understand what his goals are?
Yes, of course.
The genocide is ours, and that's it, one goal.
No. Genocide is the goal of Russia, of the Russians. To destroy Ukraine is the goal of the Russians. Personally, this is not the case with Putin. Everything is much simpler for him. He is like a Chinese. Well, he's like that, isn't he? He lives by the process, not by time in that sense, so.
And this process holds him?
Always. Some thought that he dreamed of a small victorious war. No, he needs a permanent colonial war. That is, a war that does not cause great confusion inside Russia is always happening somewhere there, and constantly thereby justifies its existence. He can constantly appeal to it, talking to his allies, I mean inside the Russian Federation, explaining to them why everything is very bad for the time being, and why it will probably be good later, but later, not now. For this, he needs such a colonial-type war. This was the first blitzkrieg that failed, and it turned into a colonial war. I talked to my agents in Russia, and they said bluntly, look, we have already managed to transfer it to the colonial war. No one in Russia is suffering now. But this conversation took place in November last year, and soon a year will pass. The war gradually ceased to be colonial. This is us going back to the beginning of the conversation. What you said is that the war ceases to be colonial, because if there are not enough people, then new resources will be needed. Second, there are more and more opponents of war in prisons. Thirdly, there is less and less bread, because there are more and more tanks. And this is already inevitable. And this inflation, it is real. Who is affected by inflation in the first place? Well, not Putin's officials. Inflation naturally affects the poorest. And inflation in Russia is the highest in the world. Well, it is clear that all these poor Russians suffered in the first place. And this does not suit Putin at all. That is, this is not the format he is counting on. He is now looking for some kind of solution, forcing his economists. But this solution does not exist in the field of economics, it happens. It exists only in politics, and it does not exist in economics. But he is interested in this eternal war. He has genocide there. This is already Medvedev and Patrushev, who act as genociders. And Putin sees war as a factor of political survival and a means of transferring power to his children, and so on.
That is, he is sitting on a Kremlin suitcase in his chair while he is fighting?
Yes, of course. Because any end to the war, let's imagine some kind of treaty. Stubb made a deal and went to discuss with Xi, possibly freezing the conflict. That is, for example, they froze everything as it is, and they are no longer fighting yet. And suddenly on the same day, what will happen? I mean, no one will lift the sanctions on this day, right? Of course not. Of course, no one will take it off. And it turns out that that's it. We live the same as before, only we have lost our goal. What was the goal before? We will now end the war, win and live well again. And here it is no longer there. And I am not talking about pensioners, but in relation to, I say, the elite, the authorities, the religious authorities. And they will come to ask, wait, what to live on? And what now? We used to understand why we endured deprivation. Why? Imagine a man who made $1 billion before the war and now earns $500 million. He is suffering deprivation because of the war, and someone must be held accountable for this decision, and it will be Putin, of course.
Definitely, yes, for all the decisions and on all articles, including criticism from his own people. Apparently, he will probably not reach The Hague.
Of course. Well, listen, I definitely can't believe that Putin will be in Hague.
So am I.
Under no circumstances at all. That he would end up in any dock, that he would ever give any testimony. I can't believe this, because they definitely have to kill him. Well, otherwise they are completely there.
I think so too. He'll be finished off before anyone even has time to blink an eye. And he, and all his doubles, if they exist, will not have time to blink. Trump is mentioned in prayers before rallies with his supporters more often than Jesus Christ 87 times to 61 times, according to The Atlantic magazine. What are they praying to Trump for?
No, well, how can I tell you? I watched Trump's speech. Really. One night. I couldn't sleep, as they say. And then on YouTube there is a live broadcast of Trump's speech to voters, just in some small American town. And I usually saw Trump in more formal situations. I saw him discussing with Biden how he speaks on the news. And here was a crowd of something like a sports complex, well, closed, and a crowd of people. And I understood again, or rather remembered, why Trump remains the leader of the election race today, and not Kamala Harris or Biden. You know, I once saw his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He deserves it, really. Because the performance that he gave is a person who, if I'm not mistaken, is 78 or 79 years old, or maybe even more.
Well, it's almost 79 to 78.
Yes, he gave a brilliant stand-up. This is a real stand-up. And it is obvious that this is not a written script. Yes, it was invented somehow, scrolled in your head, but you can't take it and fully execute it from beginning to end. This person knows how to work with the public. He became President of the United States for the only reason, you have to understand. You know, yes, what this reason is called. I mean the first time he became. He became President of the United States because he hosted the show, The Candidate, on American television for 13 seasons. That's the only reason he became president, no other reason, because all these slogans like, Make America Great Again, are also just a smokescreen. Its main slogan is, You are fired, you are fired. This is the phrase he said in this very show. He introduced it for 13 seasons. After him, for the 14th season, I think, was led by Schwarzenegger or someone like that. But he introduced 13 seasons, he produced it all here and said, You're fired, and, in fact, under this he went to Washington. I'm going to fire everyone now. He is a tough guy, because he is able to fire everyone. This is how it looked in the eyes of the public. And those who were disappointed with his presidency, in fact, why didn't they vote for him a second time, just as they did the first? He didn't fire, he didn't disperse all this, as they thought, riffraff in Washington. Now he is going on again, in general, showing this performance. Style icon. Here he is the icon of American television. He's got a star on Hollywood Alley. Therefore, it has become an icon to be worshipped. It is normal that Trump has become a kind of religion. Kamala Harris has not become a religion, but Trump has become, of course.
War. The latest events in Israel are now inevitable. Well, not today or tomorrow, Israel will strike a very strong blow to Hezbollah. The Biden administration has again for the past 2 days been desperately trying to keep the Israelis from this strike, which they absolutely need for many reasons. Including showing solidarity with friends, the only national group that supports Israelis. Because, of course, a week ago, when the Houthis killed an Israeli with their drone, Israel very seriously destroyed an entire port in response. And now 12 children have been brutally killed. It is impossible to just leave it unpunished, and it's time to deal with them. The war will rise to a new level. This will make a world war, including the Ukrainian and Israeli ones. These are just two fronts of one war. They will make this war the central issue of the election campaign, and it is necessary to win tougher positions in it. Because, no matter what happens, there were no political maneuvers, public opinion polls are stable. They show huge support for Israel, well, 100%, and 75% and 65% for support for Ukraine. Well, Israel is a traditional, more well-mannered ally of American society. And why is this position so seemingly suicidal, democratic? She is forced. And Biden did it, but Harris should have given it up. They are looking back at the left wing of the Democratic Party. Well, you saw Netanyahu's brilliant performance in Congress. It has helped us and the American people by raising the profile of this war, by emphasizing that the central issue of this election is the victory or defeat of the Western America, and the role of the leader of the free world in this war. I cannot fail to say a few words about Netanyahu. In Israel, public opinion about his figure is very divided. I don't want to take either his side or the opposite side. I have a lot of friends in both of them. My tactic is not to interfere in the internal political affairs of the countries of our allies. But the fact that he is a great orator is clear today in the English-speaking world. He is the best political orator. Much better than all American politicians. But perhaps only former British Prime Minister David Cameron performs so well. His speech can be placed alongside Churchill's best military speeches. It was an absolutely brilliant speech, which even silenced and squeezed something out of himself, causing compliments to the enemy. So, 50 Democrats did not show up for the event publicly, and one of them, Islam Omar, a member of the House of Representatives, of course, participated in the boycott of Ukraine. A certain Fatima or Halima, Katima sat in the front row with a sign, War Criminal Mukriminov. This left wing, well, to some extent to our luck, of course, does not actively support Ukraine, but at least does not show such fury against Ukraine as against Israel. But this is not just directed against Israel, it is part of the mandatory ideological set of so-called progressives, including the fight against global warming, for LGBT rights, and so on. And so I keep emphasizing the mistake. Remember, 3 months ago, I recommended that he take the brilliant step of withdrawing from the campaign, saying that he should focus on his role as president and leader of the free world in the fight against the aggressor. So he dragged it out for 3 months. And it is in vain that Harris looks back at his left wing. Why? Because I will return to the idea that I have already touched upon, that it will be the undecided votes that will decide. Yes, these left-wing fanatics will not vote for Trump on election day anyway. While they may curse Harris, it doesn't matter to them. Undecided average voters will vote for the party and leader who, by October 5th, when the war is raging in full force, will prove himself to be the most likely leader of the free world. So again, Harris has a good chance of winning this election, but only if she follows my key recommendation and takes advantage of the unique chance that events in Congress have given her, which required the administration to report on Ukraine's goals. Tell them that we fully share the objectives set out in the report of our distinguished colleagues, Messrs. McCaw, Messrs. Rogers and Thorne. This, in my opinion, is the balance of power in the political struggle in the United States today. A lot is changing. Many may disagree with me about something, but the main thing is indisputable. The war, the World War declared on Israel and Ukraine, and the role of the United States in this war are becoming the central issue of the election campaign. The winner will be the one who responds to this challenge more adequately.
Putin's aide Patrushev, former Secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, spoke about the negotiations. He said that the statements of Ukraine and the West about negotiations are a tactical ploy that is used for respite, since Russia has the advantage in the war. At the same time, Ukraine is not taking real steps towards negotiations. This is what Patrushev says. But we also remember an article from the New York Times, which reports that Russia is calling the Pentagon and complaining that Ukraine is allegedly preparing some very secret operations on Russian territory. So what is this advantage in the war that Russia is talking about?
Of course, there are no advantages, but a respite is needed. This is what we started this conversation with. Russia needs a respite in this war in order to finally fully arm and fully attack Ukraine, seizing its entire territory and tearing it to pieces. And when in these upper circles they constantly say that they need a respite, they need a respite, they need a respite, it looks like something is on fire. Moreover, these people are very primitive. They speak what they heard. If they had a conversation about respite from morning to night, then this is exactly what they are talking about. Isn't the whole world plotting a treacherous respite? Well, listen, in psychology this is a very simple technique. This is how first graders usually communicate. And Mum told me to tell him that Dad is gone, so come in. A child is very simple. These people are just as simple. They put dreams of a respite in the mouths of their opponents, because this is the only thing they themselves discuss within their government and Security Council. For them, this is the most important task, to get a break.
Why, do you know, did they call Ostian Belousov, Russia's new defense minister? Why does he, having a conscience, allow himself to turn to the collective West, with which they are allegedly at war, and ask to somehow influence Ukraine?
That is, America was the first to start the first calls to Belousov. Belousov quietly crept into his office, suddenly found the marshal's shoulder straps in his desk and was very glad that now, look, he was a real fighting person. It is strange that his jacket did not yet have 3 orders of the hero of the Soviet Union or something like that. And then, bam, the phone rang. He goes to the phone, and it turns out that the United States Secretary of Defense is on the line. You need to stand at attention. This is what level you have reached if you get a call from a living American, a person from the #1 country on planet Earth. He responded in the same way. I'm going to call America, you know, right now. Well, okay, who do they have there? Well, is anyone free? Yes, they don't sleep? Ah, an hour difference. Where is America? Let me look at my head. That's it, right now. I decided. I'll call America right now. And he called. This is how cool Geostrotech is, a desk politician, director of the one phone department. This is a personality. Look, America called him. And what about him? He took it and called her in response. This is really a human being. Well, let's go to lunch. It's very simple. It's just very simple. There is nothing to say. There is no point. But how everyone around applauds. Hours. Look, hey. He deflated the wheels for the chairman of the collective farm. That's what kind of Vaska we have. If anything, he also has the coolest moonshine. So now we are for Vasya.
Is the United States really so afraid of the Kremlin that at its request it then calls from Ukraine and asks to cancel all plans and all covert operations?
No one calls Ukraine. And America is not a country that you can say, listen, call. When talking in the public space, especially taking into account the differences in translations, Foreign Minister Lavrov always defiantly addresses his interlocutor on a first-name basis, despite the fact that in English this is the address, you, which translates as you. There is no you. in English. But everyone knows, ours, look, ours, look, he is on you, to him, and he is on you. This is the difference in translation. Politics is built around something that does not exist or that is very illusory, but should look as convincing as possible. And for someone to call someone, and after that there are some consequences. There are consequences after non-public calls. And the parties did not stop calling each other. They called each other during the Cold War and the Hot War, about the troops in Afghanistan and the attack on Syria. Everyone is always in touch with each other, and the headquarters, and intelligence, and the administrations of the first persons. But for America to be afraid of Russia? America, when presidents resign, creates a public library with documents from their presidency. And the most interesting thing is the memoirs. In them, presidents tell what they thought and why they made certain decisions. As long as they were in office, they were responsible for the country. They had to be strategists and serious people. Every word they said had colossal consequences. When he retires, usually as a professor at a university, he tells what he was thinking when he sat at the basis of negotiations with the Russians. Many presidents, assessing the foreign policy of the Soviet Union and the general secretaries, the delegations that came, politely said that, "I talked to these stupid people who have very strange, lively fantasies, and they seriously think that America is going to attack them. They seem to need to talk to psychiatrists." But as a result, for some reason, they talk to me. Well, it so happened that I, apparently, am in the role of a psychiatrist. American presidents, if you carefully study their memoirs, have always treated Russian delegations, Russian initiatives and Russian foreign policy as a misunderstanding. In their notes, they described how they were surprised to see that the Russians seriously believed in their ideas, that their strategy seemed primitive and absurd. They did not say it to their faces, but in their memoirs they described in detail their feelings and understanding of the situation. That is, these are not only facts, but also their personal perception. We sit with him, I look at him and I realize that this Russian really believes in what he says. But this is absurd. In the normal world, we understand that this is a diagnosis. This is just a psychiatric diagnosis. And this has been happening throughout the existence of the Soviet Union. This is how it began in 1917, and it did not end in 2024. And to say that America is afraid? It's good if America doesn't openly smirk sarcastically. It's good if she makes a serious face. But this is the maximum. What is really very funny is that you have to deal with such idiots.
A naval parade was held in St. Petersburg. He was received personally by the Russian ruler Putin, and many paid attention to the greeting of the sailors. Let's see it with you.
Hello, sailors. I congratulate you on your participation in the celebration of the Russian Navy.
The crew of the ship, in response to the greeting of the President of the Russian Federation, performs the ceremonial movement, Tinjai, which symbolizes great respect for a person. The crew raises their right hand in front of the body and says the greeting, "Long live the Russian Navy."
Some flashbacks. Do you understand what Tinjai is?
I was in the Navy and we didn't even have a "Hi Hitler" greeting, if it was called Chinjai. Now, in the country of fascism, it was necessary to find those who would legitimize the new version of the army salute. You know, someone had to be the first. They had just come up with an idea, and it was necessary for someone to report. They decided to persuade the sailors to take this position and say, "Well, sailors, in the name of Peter, the fleet, let's take off our masks." Well, Hi Hitler, Comrade President, has already existed. And so 3 times. The Nazis had once, the Germans had one. And we, The Russians have 3. Called, however, in Chinese.
I just wonder what they will demonstrate next, if it is already so open.
Well, further down the list there are many cultural nuances and contacts with the outside world. For example, there is also a lot of beauty in harakiri. This is when a war is lost. And now this attribute of fascism, because the Soviet Union did not cultivate German fascism in vain. It was not in vain that it sang common songs and tried to march in the same way. True, the Germans marched better than the Russian army or the Red Army. Now it is necessary to finally excavate, complete and present this historical layer. In this paraphernalia, in addition to Heil Hitler, there are also analogues in Russia, SA, SD, sulfur monosulfide. There are also torchlight processions, and, as in the program, burning at the stake. They will start with books, and then move on to people.
If you recall the parade that took place, they did not show the ships that were attacked by Ukraine. During the broadcast of the main naval parade in honor of the Navy, only 2 ships of the Black Sea Fleet were shown, the corvette, Mercury, and the frigate, Admiral Grigorievich. The media report that the parade did not show the ships that were allegedly attacked by Ukraine. Although there was evidence that the ships either received minor damage or went to the bottom. Why Putin did not mention this and why they did not present the fact that Ukraine allegedly did not sink anything remains unclear.
Почему Путин об этом не вспомнил и почему они не презентовали то, что якобы Украина там ничего у них не потопила?
It is very difficult to play this game. On the one hand, everything is for the front and for victory. Get up. The country is huge. And on the other hand, there is a peaceful life. Rest in the Crimea. To combine this, especially for Putin, is completely powerless. Everything turns out to be too eclectic. Either you have a war, and everything to the last, or a peaceful life, and somewhere out there something will slowly leak and the bastards.
Demonstrating your own defeated equipment and focusing on the fact that the entire Black Sea Fleet was sunk by Ukraine is not for a holiday. Ukraine, which does not have serious compulsory medical insurance, won the fight in the fleet, and the Black Sea Fleet, driven under the bench, is now more likely to be submerged than surfaced. Putin, who could not even remember what exactly is being celebrated, congratulating the fleet on Navy Day, will not be able to draw any analogies. If they see a frightened elderly person, it is easy and simple to intimidate him. His psychiatric diagnoses, although rewritten, remain known.
It is clear what pills can be used for cupping, but it is better not to put it at a dead end once again. For Putin, everything related to dead ends is already a serious problem. And here is a parade. Everything is in white, beautiful. Hurrah! Heil Hitler.
For Putin, the German-speaking president, now a dictator, this style and logic are absolutely clear. And suddenly something unpresentable appears. A combat general without an arm, a knocked-out tank or, God forbid, a warship raised from the bottom of the sea, which was a symbol of the Russian world and was approved by Ukraine.
This does not happen at parades. At the parades, congratulations take place, and then the soldiers and sailors are given 2 hard-boiled eggs, a piece of butter and bread. This, in fact, is the main holiday. Everyone else goes to drink vodka. That's all. There is no place for shadows and half-tones, only bright white light, only parade and the absolute inviolability of existence. There was such a parade last year, the year before last, and always, with the exception of 1941 and 1945. Therefore, eternal Russia is fine. Parades on schedule.
The Institute for the Study of War reports that Russia used Navy Day to try to create an alliance against the West, as the event involved countries such as Azerbaijan, Venezuela, Vietnam, Cuba, Myanmar, Syria and Qatar, which allegedly cooperate with Russia. What do you think Russia has demonstrated and why should it now demonstrate these relations with a number of non-Western states?
Russia, it is great. Russia, it occupies the most important place on the globe. At the same time, no matter what international event happens, there are no delegates from this globe. They don't go to Russia, they don't shake hands, they don't lie at their feet, they don't kiss. How can it be? And yet, Russia is a country that does not end anywhere. It has geopolitical interests everywhere and allies and friends everywhere. Earlier, as you can't line up all sorts of military attaches on the podium of the mausoleum to the horizon, friends, there are Africa, the Middle East, and South America. This game continues. It's the same as playing parade. There will be a parade. There will be international relations. Any delegation in any configuration will do. Friendly, military joint exercises, chambers of commerce, or common economic spaces. Russia should in no way look disadvantaged and deprived of external contacts before itself or the world. After all, for a Soviet person, the most important thing was abroad. The Soviet man clung to abroad all his life. The fetishization of the West was absolute. It is no coincidence that if an American called, it was considered an event. The presence of an American is already a holiday. It is already happiness. The wedding general is not so important as a living American, any American. But the French governess was also from the same series, teaching the children of the nobility, because foreigners were considered the highest class. Any Russian nobleman was considered more respectable if there were more foreign admixtures in his origin and blood. If you were a nobleman from completely Russian roots, then it was considered second-rate. But if, for example, you were Lermontov, this is already the first grade. If von Wiesen, this is definitely the first grade. Well, because abroad has always been considered something special, before which the Soviet people groveled all their lives. And now there is no foreign country. Even Americans, like Hershkowitz, are in prison. Finding a normal Swede is almost impossible. The French come extremely rarely. Germans, although considered friends, also do not often come here. So it was important for Russia to find someone who would be suitable for their purposes.